This is the last chapter within relationships, gone through a lot more quickly than we would have done if we were at school. So looking at beliefs about gender equality. So gender equality is, now I know that we could expand this to include transgender and so on, but for the purpose of the exam, we are talking men and women. We are talking male and female purely for the exam. So gender equality. This is something where I look at some key terms there: gender equality, prejudice. We know what prejudice means: unfairly judging someone before the facts are known. Sexual stereotyping, having a fixed general idea. So, for example, men do science and maths, and girls will at school will, and even then I just used the word men and then just word girls. So it's actually boys do science and maths, girls go and do like more like the health and social kind of work, or textiles and things. So there is like a stereotype that we expect certain genders to do certain things. Um, and then you have discrimination, and because when you expect someone to do something, when if you've got a woman who comes along who wants to do something that's more sciencey, that she can be discriminated against simply because she's a woman. So these are some key terms that you need to be able to be using. So it's an interesting quote there, a letter to a careers expert. I'll just read it out. It was from the newspaper called The Guardian. I recently had an interview at a well-respected firm. I was interviewed by two men. I am female. I was asked by one of them how I would cope with the work, bearing in mind I have two children. I was stunned to be asked this in 2015, and while I wanted to challenge them by asking whether they're putting the same question to male candidates, I answered along the lines of fine, obviously, I would not have applied for this position, and I've worked since my children were small. I mean, there's two things there about, now the men might not have been aware about the sexist question that they were asking, um, but it's sexist because, you don't in general ask men that particular question, but women get asked that question an awful lot. Also, if the woman wants the job, she can't challenge that sexism as well. So it's almost like a double whammy. Not only is she being asked sexist questions, but she can't challenge it because she wants the job. Because she challenges it, she probably won't get the job because they might see her as a troublemaker. Oh, we've got a feminist here and we don't want this woman working at this. So you're kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place when you are being discriminated against. And that's a really good example. Now, the roles of men and women in the past was clearly we live a patriarchal society, which means that men are in charge. You will know, those who do history will know about the suffragettes in the early 20th century trying to get the votes for women. Um, and women at the time also were not allowed to divorce their husbands, while the husbands could divorce the women. Um, even to the point where the husbands could be absolutely appalling in their behavior and having affairs. The woman was not allowed to divorce the husband. The Sexual Discrimination Act in 1975 made gender discrimination illegal, but doesn't mean that everything's fair at this moment in time. So for example, on average, women are paid less than men. Some paid less than men for doing the same jobs, and women make up roughly half of the workforce, but men hold a higher proportion of senior positions in most companies. So now there are going to be factors in that, when a woman decides to have a family and that she goes on maternity leave, there is a very real difficulty here, in a practical way, and that she goes on maternity leave and then she might miss on the opportunity for promotion. We talked about the nature of the family and the roles in the family. Very often the woman might go to work, and then when she comes back, she's bringing up the kids. Now, how much of an equal relationship in bringing up the kids does she have with her partner? It's still seen, if the woman's working full time, that seems to be the main carer, in washing the clothes and cooking the food and doing the food shopping and all that kind of stuff. So there does seem to be unequal roles um, between um, a man and a woman. Now, I know we can't get away from the fact, that women are the only gender that can have children. So maybe we need to reorganize society to make sure that they don't miss out with their career as well if they want to go back to their career. Now, when it comes to Christian beliefs and responses, they've kind of reflected society as well. So traditionally, the church would not allow women to be church leaders. In the early 90s, the Church of England allowed women to be priests, to be vicars, church leaders. It was very controversial at the time, and there's still some people who don't like it all this time later. The Catholic Church still refuses women to be priests. And so there's discrimination there within the Catholic Church. And part of it is because of quotes like the one that's in the book. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Okay. Now, that seems really. Now, if you take a literal interpretation of the Bible, that seems really quite clear. But if you take an interpretation of the Bible as a whole, you compare that to the quote where before, where it says like the husband, you have to sacrifice yourself for your wife, as Christ sacrificed himself for the church. Then you need to take that into consideration as well. But people don't, do they? They just pick and choose the quotes that they like to justify their behavior. So therefore, you're going to have a lot of Christians who believe that the man's in charge of the relationship and that's it. And it's almost like God is punishing all women because Eve ate the fruit in the Garden of Eden. Everything seems to come back to the creation story and the Garden of Eden. But when we look at the New Testament and Jesus, one of the things that really sticks out with Jesus' treatment of women is that he challenged the status quo. He treated women with respect. He made a point of including women in his work. He made a point of women who were outcast. He made a point of bringing them back into society. There's a very famous story of two women, Mary and Martha, and he went round to their house. They had a brother, Lazarus, and one of them was doing all the housework, the traditional women's job, and the other woman was sitting at Jesus' feet being taught. And the woman was doing the housework, was getting a bit irritated with her sister, saying, "Come on, tell my sister to get off her backside and come and actually help me in the house," because essentially she wasn't doing the woman's job; she was doing the man's job, sitting listening to Jesus' teaching. And Jesus said, "No, she's doing the right thing. She's chosen wisely. She needs to learn." So he was, for us, that might not seem a lot, but for the culture at the time, Jesus was really acknowledging that women should be educated just in the same way that men are being educated as well. And there's a quote there from Galatians in the New Testament: "There is neither Jew nor Gentile, Gentiles and non-Jews, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female. You are all one in Christ Jesus." So quite clearly, you have got total equality there. You might have different roles, you might have different responsibilities and different skill sets, but ultimately we are all equal in Christ. So for most Christians today, see marriage as an equal partnership, where the different gifts of each person, male and female, strengthen family life. But you will get other Christians who will go down the more old-fashioned traditional route, where the man is in charge in the way that it used to be, even not that long ago, say 40, 50 years ago. And then you go back the centuries, it was always the men that were in charge. So again, in the last 30, 40 years, there's been a massive cultural change in relationships between men and women. And so that are the chapters. But I mean, just to sum up, this whole module really is, from the 60s onwards, there has been a massive change. And you can actually pin maybe a lot of it down to the introduction of effective contraception. This gave women the ability to control their fertility, which meant that they're in charge of when they have children, not their husbands. It meant that it challenged the status quo of relationships and what families meant. It meant that women, if she wanted to, could go out into the workplace and have a career and decide when she's going to have a child. And so it also meant that they could have more equality within society. because more power has been given to women, because she is now in charge of her own fertility. So all of that, most people are going to say that's a really good thing, but you are going to get some Christians who are a lot more traditional and literal, who think, oh no, society's gone too far. Obviously, you will have your opinion. Um, the Christians disagree with each other. Lots of Christians, I would say more Christians now think in terms of equality, and that women should be respected and have their own free will and do whatever it is they want to do. And the old-fashioned way of the man being in charge seems a bit more traditional, and it's a bit more dying out. Okay, but you are going to have, it takes time, you are going to have your own viewpoint on that. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the assessment criteria and how to answer these questions.